Today we're going to give this amazing barn find classic the old Vile treatment. Based on the amount of dust on this thing, I estimate that this particular vehicle has been sitting for at least 2,000 years now. Anyways, enough yakking, let's get to cutting. You spent thousands of dollars having all the trim on the car re-chromed, but that $10 leaf spring bushing, no way, sir, I ain't paying you that. That's highway robbery. Chrome's gotta look good while you're dog trucking down the road. At least somebody's replaced this side sometime in the last 90 some odd years. I can tell that because they completely mangled this inner fender panel instead of removing the 3 bolts that hold it on, because you know that's just the way it's done. I'm actually a little more afraid of this side. You know, I don't want to know what they did to this spring mount here to install that, but I guess we'll be finding out. Right in the eye. Right in the eye where the oil would come out, it was coming out. I can't believe that. A little pro tip when you disconnect the torque tube from the transmission and you gotta pull the rear end back, don't put your face right underneath it because there's gonna be oil coming out. Right where you would expect it to come out. So it's become apparent none of this has ever been apart or out of the car before. You can see up top here, this is just super crusty. This is the part that's kind of concealed inside the cross member. And so they weren't able to give it the old rattle can rebuild, but that's okay. And this still has the original bushing in here for the front of the drive shaft. And you can see it has the same amount of play that the other side did before we fixed it. The other weird thing on this is the end of this, you can probably see it's kind of messed up, so not sure what happened there. I guess it doesn't really matter because we're not using it, but there's definitely been something going on here or grinding against here at some point. Amazing part is I did not have to heat up, break, or cut a single piece of hardware on this entire disassembly process. Everything came out, and like you can see, like this has never been apart before. This is the nut for the U-bolt, and you can see it's not even like a hexagonal shape anymore. It's just completely, side was facing the front of the car, and it's completely battered from gravel dust and 90 years of stuff hidden on it. So, but yet it still all came apart. Nothing broke. Pretty amazing. Just look at how completely ruined all this stuff is, but yet this is all hogged out, yet it just comes apart like nothing. So all you folks into the late model stuff from the 50s and 60s and 70s, and you're really missing out. You got to get yourself a pre-war car. The quality of like the actual hardware used on this stuff is incredible. Like you can't even get a bolt to do this anymore without, it's like somewhere right after World War II, just the quality of everything started going downhill. I know what you're saying, that's all well and fine, but this car obviously hasn't been laying in a field for 90 years. Well, when I pulled the rear differential out of the parts car, everything came apart on that too. These are the U-bolts out of that. Not a single one broke, not a single bolt broke, nothing broke. Didn't have to heat anything up, didn't have to cut anything. It all just came apart like nothing. And now we get the joyous task of replacing these bushings, these things, and I have some better ones of these that aren't all hogged out, because these ones are no good anymore. I replaced these years ago on my 36 truck, and I had a super awesome system for removing and installing them, and now I forgot what that system is. I do know that I put these in the freezer, which helped, but as far as getting the old ones out, I've completely forgotten how I did that. So now we can start struggling. Just using a Princess Auto ball joint press to push out this old bushing. It's definitely slow going, but it seems to be working. It would help to heat this up, but the gas tank is right here, and I don't want to pull a shed by the tracks. I mean, that guy will do anything for views, but I'm not that desperate, so we'll just do it the safe way, the slow and steady way. Yep. It's been in there for a while, but this seems to be working quite well, actually. And there's no way I was gonna get this out with a hammer and a chisel. Absolutely no way. So my normal method of operations here is to spend 2 to 3 business days struggling and swearing and building some kind of elaborate sketchy device that results in a lot of blood loss and frustration, and usually destroying whatever part that I'm trying to save. But I decided to do things a little different this time and just do a quick search on the old internet to see if there was an easier way to remove those bushings, and that's where Google actually came through for once, and it sent me to a YouTube channel called Scott Rods, I think, and it looks like he's working on a 36 Chevy Coupe, and so I can't take credit for this idea. This is his idea, and this just saved me so much time and frustration. I know it's a fairly obvious thing to most of you probably, but I forgot I even had one of these. There was no way it was happening without this tool. So yeah, this is just a Princess Auto ball joint removal tool. Nothing fancy, but it also works for Chevy leaf spring bushings. So thanks again to Scott Rods for making that video and saving me a whole bunch of time and suffering. So we've made the difficult decision to sacrifice the beautifully done carpeting job in this vehicle. My apologies to whoever installed this carpet. I'm sure you worked really hard on it, but if you hadn't been such a cheapskate and you replaced the severely worn out throwout bearing while you were restoring the car, you wouldn't have to do any of this. So that's that, I guess. Looks like Red Green had a hand in the upholstery job on this one. What the hell? That's new. What have they done here? Did they glue it down too? I don't know what the sound deadening properties of cardboard is. Leave a comment if you know. That's I mean, the fact that they actually took the time to screw it all down too, the stove bolts. I don't know what to say there. Looks like they ran out of duct tape partway through, so I switched over to packing tape back here. Makes sense. So up here we have a piece of the thin MDF painted black, and then it looks like they ran out of that, so they switched over to the cardboard material here for the rest of it. I don't quite understand what this is going to be doing, but there it is. They got her installed. I think this is what happens when you restore an entire car using only materials you can find in your garden shed. Alright, well, I guess I didn't have to destroy the carpet. Gas pedal just popped right off. What the hell is going on here? Actually, you know what? I did have to destroy that carpet. It had to go one way or the others. We have some kind of foam structure. I think I figured it out. They were just trying to quiet the bad throwout bearing and the noisy rear end. So instead of fixing that, you just add a few layers of cardboard, some packing tape, some duct tape, old chunk of foam, and you're set. Fixes itself. Who's ready for some struggling? Not me. Don't let the size of this fool you. It weighs about as much as a transmission, 3 times its size. Especially when you're trying to work in this cramped area here by yourself. Even though, even if you had a helper, there's only enough room in this car for one person. So, yeah, not fun. So here's our problem here. These cars use a carbon throwout bearing. It's just a chunk of carbon, and it's kind of soaked and lubricated with oil, and pretty simple. But this is the one that came out of the car, which was not surprisingly making noise. And you can see this is what it's supposed to look like. See how there's a bunch of material there? See how there's nothing here, and it's actually worn like an 1/8 inch groove all the way into this thing. And you wouldn't even think these are the same parts, but they are. This one's just completely ruined. This one is used, but we've been soaking it in oil for a few weeks just to let the carbon kind of soak up the oil, I guess. And if it does ever make noise, you can just fill it through this oil thingy from the top. But I figured, seeing as it's been sitting around for 70 some odd years, we'd refill it. We'd just soak it for a while and get it hydrated or whatever. And this can go in the garbage. Oh, we've just discovered that our U-joint is wore out as well. So that kind of puts us in a bad spot, because I don't really want to put all this back together just to take it all back apart again to change the U-joint. Where the heck are we going to find a U-joint for a 35 Chevy Master? Oh wait, for once somebody was actually thinking ahead, and we managed to acquire a new old stock U-joint for our 35 Chevy here. So now we can just get this swapped out and we'll be good to go. Got it. Got it. Oh, Dinah. So I finally listened to the internet and I made some dowel pins for guiding the transmission in, and I gotta say, this is the way to do it. Never again do I want to just blindly try and jam it in there. There's so much struggling that way, but this just made it so much easier. So there you go. I'm just hoping that I don't need these bolts that I cut down for something. I found them in the bin, but I don't know if they're important or not. Oh, this is the U-joint cover here. Just cleaned it up, and I bought one of these gasket kits for it. But just so everybody knows, they say it's for 29 to 54, excluding 33 to 36 standard, which is a completely different car from what we have. But anyways, the rear seal on this is completely different. All the other seals will work, but the rear seal will not fit a 35 Master. So whatever, I just reused the old seal. It wasn't damaged, or at least didn't appear to be. Probably going to leak, but as long as it's not pouring out, I'm not going to worry about it too much. This is, it comes with a bunch of these shims as well. These fit here. So these all fit properly, and you're supposed to like shim this housing on here to the transmission, and if you go too tight it damages this, and if you go too loose it's going to leak. So problem is, near as I can tell, you have to split the U-joint every time you want to add or subtract a shim. So I think we're just going to guess on that and probably err on the side of caution, go a little bit loose. Probably going to go for about 3 shims, and again, if it leaks, it leaks. As long as it's not pouring out, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to start chasing oil leaks on this car, because you fix one leak and 10 more spring up. And it's also good rust proofing. Anyways, time's come to ditch this old axle, and we can plug in our new strange 9-inch rear end. It's rated for 1500 horsepower, at least once, for about 2 or 3 feet. Should definitely have no problem handling the twin turbo LS that we got in this thing. So on newer Chevys, you can just assemble this right onto the torque tube before you install it. On these 35 to 36 Chevys, they have this X-frame, kind of like a early Ford, and they made this center section just small enough so you can't install this. So you have to slide the drive shaft in part way, and then come at it from the front and slide this on as it's partially installed already. And why they did it this way? Just literally to be difficult. There's no reason. Look at like the acres of room under here. All they had to do was make this like 1.5 inches wider, but no, because that's just the way they did things, just to be difficult. Now I get to try and feed this thing through this tiny opening in the floor here. And I already tell that's not going to go. Well, after a certain amount of struggling, we got this all loosely assembled. I did manage to remember to install the paper shims. I used 3, so really hoping this doesn't leak too bad. Actually, it wasn't that bad of a job, but I don't really want to do it again. So I'm hoping we put everything together right. They do make a tool for installing the U-joints to kind of hold them in place, and I didn't think that was necessary, but the tool definitely would have made this go a lot easier. So anyways, just gonna leave this loose for now. because I want to get the rear leaf springs back in, the rear axle actually located, so we're not putting any weird strain on that when we go to tighten it down. So that's what we're going to do now, is get the rear axle in. I'm just working on transferring the brakes from this axle over to this, and that's kind of turning into its own mini restoration project, getting everything cleaned up and all the grooves filed and cleaned up and all that nonsense, everything seized up and whatever. So as one would expect, just a lot of fiddly, tedious nonsense going on today, nothing too exciting. Most of the heavy lifting is done. Well, it's a very exciting day here today, folks. One of our viewers was watching one of my previous videos where I was struggling to get in and out of our 1950 Chevy 1-ton because it has a non-functional driver's door. So he sent me a message and offered to trade me this perfectly good door for my super terrible cobbled together door. So didn't take a whole lot of convincing to make that deal. I guess he wants to use the old door for yard art or wall art or something like that. And this door is a lot more useful to me because it's actually functional. So I'm really looking forward to having a driver's door on that truck. So we're going to get this cleaned up real quick and bolted on, and then we'll drive off into the sunset and it'll be a beautiful day. So the door latch is a little Titanic-y, but I think if we pop it off here and soak it in something for a while, it'll come back around for us. We're going to turn our attention now to the transmission mount. As you can see, it's in poor condition. Now, apparently you can actually send these out to be re-vulcanized, but I don't know a whole lot about Star Trek, so I opted to just buy this rubber kit, and we're just going to install new rubber. This looks like it's a universal thing, I'm guessing, because this doesn't. Anyways, whatever. We'll make it work. Anything is better than this. All right, we got the transmission cross member reinstalled with the new mounting setup, so that's all secured again. Also forgot to show you, but I did get the rear springs installed and the axle back in. Well, I think I showed you putting the axle back in, but you got the springs installed as well. I'm just under here right now, just greasing up all the various points of interest. There is a lot of grease fittings on this car. And the service manual says you're supposed to re-grease everything and check the oils on everything every 1,000 miles, which seems pretty ridiculous by today's standards, but you got to remember 1927 Model T, you're supposed to be re-oiling everything every 100 miles, so that's a pretty big improvement from 1927 to 1935. You get 1,000 miles out of your car, and of course, nobody ever actually did that, so they were driven right into the ground, most of these cars. And so it'd be kind of interesting, you know, how long these cars would have actually lasted if people performed the proper service on them. But anyways, I guess this one is still here 90 years later in some slightly decrepit format, so they were doing something right. For people who are new here, here's why we're replacing the differential. You can probably see here already. And this bearing is completely cooked, and you can see how it was actually spinning in the housing here. So that's no good. Obviously, we could have just got a bearing or bearings, I guess, but we also have damage to the pinion gear itself. There's a pretty big chunk taken out of it here, and it's all pretty chipped up along. These ones are okay, but there you go. There's definitely some damage here, and I think a lot of that was actually caused by somebody messing with this before, and they screwed it up when they were putting this bearing on or pulling it off, or one or the other. But anyways, I could also feel some chunks inside of here. So anyways, we're into this for a complete rebuild. Let's just say that, which I guess isn't impossible, other than I can't find a ring and pinion set for this. And we already had a differential in the parts car, and it seems to be working fine. So why spend a couple grand and several months trying to track down all the parts when the problem could be solved for essentially free, at least for now. At some point, I'm sure we'll have to rebuild something, but for now, we're back on the road. So that's why we are not using the old differential. And I'm glad I caught this, because that wasn't gonna hold together for much longer, most likely. Well, you may be wondering, why did I just take apart the old differential? Good question. More importantly, why is the differential from the car sitting on the floor? Wasn't it just in the car a few moments ago? Yes it was. Some of you may recall in the last video that I changed the bushing at the front of the drive shaft, and I replaced it with an Oklahoma bushing, which is a one-piece bushing. And I was kind of doubting myself. I wasn't too sure if it was done right or not, but it was seated all the way back as far as I knew, so I thought it was okay. But I put everything together, and I wasn't feeling good about it. I just didn't seem like something was quite right, but it went all back together. We were all back together, and things were going together, you know. And we were in here, and we were filling up the transmission with oil, and it was taking a while to fill up. So I thought, while we're in here, I would just open up the service manual and refresh my memory on how to adjust the brakes, because that was kind of the next step on this process. So I got to open up this book here and literally land right on the page for drive shaft bushing. And what do I see? But there's the bushing. There is the seal that we removed. And what's this behind here? A washer. What? A washer? How could this be? In replacing this bushing, the packing washer retainer and the packing washer is assembled into the inside of the housing and the bushing driven from place so that the packing washer retainer sits against the shoulder on the inside of the propeller shaft housing. The shoulder on the inside of the propeller shaft housing. Oh no. It was at this moment we realized that we had made a terrible mistake. So before panicking and making any rash decisions, I decided to remove or disassemble the old differential just to confirm that information. And we tear the whole differential apart, and here's the drive shaft bushing, and here is the seal, and here is that washer. This washer that we did not remove when we replaced the bushing in this differential. Awesome. So this washer sits inside here, and there's a slightly raised lip inside of this tube that this sits up against. And I thought that this washer was actually part of the torque tube assembly because I could not get it out of that when I was replacing the Oki bushing. And in the instructions for installing the Oki bushing, it didn't say anything about there being a washer in there because they just assumed that the people installing it are not going to be a complete idiot like I am. So this washer was in there up against that lip, and the Oklahoma bushing, it has a machined edge about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch long, where it is meant to fit inside of there. So that's when we ripped out the differential, and I managed to successfully remove the bushing without damaging anything. And if you remember from the last video, this was seated all the way up here. Now that just didn't seem right to me that it would be that far ahead, but again, I thought that washer was part of this, and so I just wasn't using my brain. And the problem with this being further ahead is that this yoke, even though it all went together fine, with this being so far ahead, the first time you go over a big bump or whatever, that yoke is going to smash into that bushing. You do that a few times and you're going to have a bad day. The only possible defense I have for such idiotic behavior is that the washer in this tube, it was seized in there, like right, powerful, good. So if you're illiterate like me and you didn't read the freaking service manual before you did the thing and put it all back together, anyways, not too pleased with myself, but anyways, we struggled and struggled and struggled to get that washer out. I tried every trick in the book, and I ended up having to drill a small hole kind of right on the edge of the washer, and then I was able to use a pick tool, and I was able to kind of push that washer ahead and break it loose from the tube. And after that, it all went fairly well, and then we were able to drive the bushing back in, repin it, and I just threaded a screw in here with some Loctite and filed it off, and that's where we're at. So now we can finally put this differential that we don't even know if it's any good yet, but we're going to put it back in and redo a whole day's worth of work again. Now, to add to the confusion, in the later Chevrolet or GM cars that use a torque tube, it is my understanding that when you use the Oklahoma bushing, you don't have to remove the rear part of the bushing or the rear seal. You just drive the new bushing in and it kind of solves all your problems. But on these earlier cars, you do have to remove all of that. And honestly, I think if I was to ever do this again, I would just buy the two-piece bushing with the seal rather than buy the Oklahoma bushing, because the only real benefit to this is that the seal is now riding on a different part of the drive shaft, which is good, but the problem is that the seal is like 70 years old. And I tried getting a new seal from the local bearing place, and they no longer exist in that size. So I just soaked the seal for like a couple weeks with Lucas, and it seems to have come back around, but still, I just, in hindsight, rather than all this monkeying around, it would have been easier just to buy the proper Chevrolet bushings with a new seal, which I believe is a modern seal, so it would seal better anyways, and just avoid all of this nonsense. But lesson learned. None of this information is going to apply to 99.99% of the people out there. I believe it's only the 35 Chevy Masters and 36 Chevy, I guess, Standard or Master, and 36 Chevy trucks that use this particular setup. So again, not really helpful, but if there's like anybody out there that's planning on doing this may prevent them from making the same mistake that I did. Actually, no one's going to make the same mistake because nobody is as ignorant as I am. I did notice that this ball here is way too tight, so we're going to end up having to add more shims to here while we have the torque tube out. So I'm going to fix that now, which we wouldn't have been able to really figure out before. So we're just eliminating all the problems that I've created for myself one at a time, and hopefully that will make things go easier later on. Well, we're now officially right back where we were yesterday when I decided to rip this whole thing apart, which worked out to about 24 hours right to the dot from when I started taking this apart. Not that I was working on it for 24 hours straight. No way that I'm that ambitious. But anyways, worked on it till about 10 o'clock last night, and then I got the rear end out and got the bushing out, and then I started getting frustrated, so I waited until today to get that washer out and put it all back together, and that basically burned up the whole day. That's okay. That's okay. We refilled the back of the transmission again. One thing with these, I'm not sure how much it matters, but it makes sense to me, is the fill plug is at the front of the transmission, but a lot of folks say that you should also fill up this ball here, even though it is oiled by the transmission, because there's not really a clear path of oil to get back here, and that's how the U-joint is lubricated, is just from the oil in the transmission. So what I did is there's a bolt here that doesn't really go to anything, and so I just took that out and filled the oil up into here. So now this is all lubricated. We don't have to worry about running that dry. Also, I ended up running 5 shims on this housing gasket here, and it's a lot happier now, so I'm glad I caught that as well. So basically, even though I was really hoping to be actually driving this car today, which isn't going to happen unfortunately, but we fixed 2 pretty serious problems that would have come back to bite us, and I feel a lot better about this cobbled together mess now, so I think we're in better shape even though we won't be driving it today. I'm going to finish putting the steering column back together and get the horn wired up and put the floor in, adjust the clutch. We got to grease the front end and then adjust the brakes, and I think we'll be ready for a test drive after that. So sounds simple, but way things go, we've got another day at least in this just to get it drivable, and then there's still a lot more little fiddly things we have to tinker with, but I'm going to shut up and start working. I suppose cat's out of the bag. We took this car for a drive. No, I didn't take you along. Sorry, not sorry. We will do a test drive on this, but it's not quite ready yet. But test drive was largely a success. At least so far, the rear end is not making any noise. The car drives better than it ever has. It's a weird sensation driving this car, but because it doesn't feel like a 90-year-old car. But anyways, we'll get into that when we go for a test drive. We do have some more work to do. One of the things is, as soon as we got back, the packing and the water pump, which I knew I had to replace, and I have new packing for it, well, it just completely 100% let go. I drove the car in here and that was it. Shut it off and boom, puking out. It's always been dripping a little bit, but now it's done. And then I was looking at these radiator hoses and they are also complete garbage, right on the verge of total structural collapse. So that's going to be tomorrow's job. I also have some more fiddling around to do with adjusting the brakes. They're not quite set in the way that I would like them to be, but that's all pretty minor stuff. Overall, as of right now anyways, this was a total success. And again, sorry for not taking you around for the first drive, but this is like more of a personal quest for me. And sometimes it's nice to just kind of enjoy those small victories without the cameras rolling, because usually when the cameras are on, that's when stuff goes wrong. So I'm going to fix all that, and then we'll come back, take this thing for a drive, and I'll take you all along on the magnificent journey, and hopefully it all goes well. Well, gather around, folks. Let's all go for a drive in the old Chevy. So this car is a Canadian-built 1935 Chevy Master. The Canadian-built cars are slightly different from the American cars in that the Master all came with Chevrolet's knee-action front suspension, which was introduced in 1934, also known as the Dubonnet front suspension, and it kind of gets a bad reputation, but we're on a really rough road right now, and it's really doing a pretty convincing job soaking up the bumps. This is, of course, a 90-year-old car now, but it really doesn't feel like a 90-year-old car. It's actually quite pleasant to drive, and it certainly doesn't drive like a modern car, but in a lot of ways that's a good thing. But, you know, it just... I don't know, it's a totally different driving experience from really any other vehicle that I've driven anyways. And I know a lot of guys like to hot rod these things out and put in a different front suspension and everything, but I actually gotta say the knee action has won me over here, and to me, it would ruin the car for me anyways to rip all of that out, take everything that makes the car interesting and unique, and just put in a generic engine and generic suspension and make the car drive like a Pinto. So that's kind of my feeling on this. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for this car, I just think it's good to kind of preserve it as is, rather than try to make it into something that it's not. There's got to always be at least kind of one semi-original car out there. These cars are kind of largely forgotten about, and even by die-hard General Motors enthusiasts. They were really only out for a very short time. They did not get released until late January of 1935. And by September of 1935, the 36 model had been released. So these cars were already obsolete. For me personally, I just really enjoy the styling of this car, and the driving experience now that we've fixed a lot of the issues is also quite a bonus as well. But I just think these are really interesting cars to look at, and it's also was a pretty big year for GM in 1935 because this is the first year for the one-piece turret top roof. Everything before that just had the fabric insert, and the roof is made out of multiple pieces welded together. But this was a huge engineering feat, and even today it's quite impressive to stamp such a large curved panel out of one sheet of metal. That was a big deal then and now. So that's quite interesting. It's also the only year that Chevrolet had suicide doors on the front and the rear of the car. And a lot of the styling from this, you can see, was heavily influenced by the 1933 Cadillac aerodynamic coupe concept car, which was designed by Harley Earl. And you can see the pontoon fenders and the shape of the suicide doors, and just the overall profile of the body was really heavily influenced by that car in 1933. And it really, kind of dictated the shape of cars for the next 10 to 15 years. Well, thanks for sticking with me through the 1935 Chevy saga. Sure is nice when you do a whole bunch of work to something and it actually drives better than it did. You didn't just do all that work for nothing. This car is so much nicer to drive. It was like undrivable before. And really all we did is just replace a few things here and there. For the most part, we just took things apart, cleaned them, put them back together, and they magically worked better. There were a few hard parts that had to be replaced, and a few parts from the parts car, which really saved the day. If you're gonna have a weird car, you gotta have a parts car. There's no other real way to do it unless you're like independently wealthy. So for not a lot of money, we're back with a running, driving, functional car. It's still gonna need some work. I still got a little fiddling and adjustments and minor things to do this year. Other than that, I'm not really touching for the rest of the year. We're just going to be driving it. I got to burn through the gas in it. It's like 3 years old now, so we gotta get that out of the system. And next year there will be some more mechanical work that I have to do to it, but not like anything that's preventing it from being drivable at the moment. And then we also have some fun stuff planned for it, some cosmetic things and some interior work. And we gotta we're probably gonna have to gut most of the interior because I'd like to fill it up with sound deadener and just really, quiet it up in there. It is a little loud at the moment, and it doesn't need to be loud. So that's about it for the 35 Chevy. We're gonna be back hard on the chicken next video, and so that's what we're gonna be doing. But I just had to get this out of the way and had to get it on the road to kind of match up to my personal goal of getting one car roadworthy each year. This car is not roadworthy, so it wasn't looking like we were going to be able to do that this year. Things are touch and go, but we we stuck through it. I guess the lesson here is when things are going bad on your project, you just gotta keep at it. But we almost threw in the towel, but now we have a driving car, so it was worth all the suffering and the pain and the heartache. I've also been working on some merchandise. We have our autobody archaeology shirt here. This is the 1951 ton. And then we also have a Louisiana lap weld shirt with the Malibu on it. And then we also have some delicious chicken truck stickers. I have a lot of other stupid ideas for shirts and merchandise as well, but I just wanted to try this out. I'm not really expecting to sell anything. It'd be nice if, we sold one or two to kind of cover my costs on this endeavor. Anyways, this is just a sneak preview. These aren't actually available yet. I'm trying to get a store set up through Shopify, and I'm really struggling with that. Trying to figure out the shipping settings and the tax settings and this, that, and the other thing. I don't know. We'll figure it out eventually. I looked into going through like one of the places that kind of does all that automatically. And one of our patrons, Reen, actually was very helpful in doing a lot of research into that for me as well. But I decided, I think long term, if this works or whatever, I think I'm going to be better just having my own store through the Shopify thing. So that's what we're trying to set up. But it's I'm not computer literate, and we're having trouble figuring it all out. But hopefully by the time you guys watch this video, I will have the store up, and I'll keep everyone up to date as to when these are actually available for purchase. And nobody has to purchase them. I'm just, some people wanted t-shirts, so I'm trying this out. We'll see how it goes. And like I said, by the time this video goes on the main channel, hopefully we'll have a store up and running. But we're a couple weeks ahead on the videos, in case you don't know. So as of right now, I still have no idea what I'm doing. But maybe in a week or two, we'll have it figured out, and we'll let everybody know. I just wanted to give everyone a sneak preview of that, and I guess I'll sign off here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you back on the next video. We'll be working on the chicken truck.